This is piece number 73. It's The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. He is one of the 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And this is a high Renaissance piece. There are art actions taken in this piece that we're going to be talking about in more in depth in class, and that can be applied to other high Renaissance pieces. So it is our sample from that era. The function of the Last Supper was that the Forza family wanted to have a mausoleum, a place, right, for all of their bodies to be placed at death, and so Leonardo was hired by them. They were his patrons to paint this scene, right, a Christ-centered scene. They ended up not using it as a mausoleum, and this remained instead a part of first a monastery, and then now today it's part of a convent, and in Milan, Italy. And it is actually in the room of the convent that's like the cafeteria. It's called a refectory, and this is where the monks and then the nuns ate their meals. It's painted on dry plaster, which is not common, right, for a fresco, which is painted on wet plaster. And so the paint would adhere in the plaster and last hundreds of years. Instead, Leonardo wanted to practice with oil and with tempera paint. He wanted to have really super bright colors. And so he experimented with putting his paints on a dry plaster, and the problem was that this is on an outside wall, and it's really cold there in the winter, and there's moisture here by the Mediterranean Sea, and so moisture came through the wall, pushed on the paint, and within 18 years of him painting it on this wall, it began to peel. The door that you can see here below the table was in the table in the painting was installed in 1652, and that removed part of Jesus Christ's feet. The arms above the painting are from the Forza family that commissioned him to do this painting, and so there are their family coat of arms that still show their presence and involvement in this. The content of this piece. We're going to see in some Renaissance art paintings that the painter is trying to capture a moment, an event, but it's really just a moment. And the moment that's being captured here is before Jesus was put up on the cross, right? He had to be turned over to the Romans. And there was a member of his close following of 12 apostles that kind of turned him in, pointed him out to the Romans. And the moment that's captured here is Jesus making the announcement, one of you is about to betray me. And so all of the 12 apostles are reacting to that comment. They're grouped in 4 groups of 3, the 12 apostles are. And we can make out kind of what's happening because of the artist's choices about these groupings and about the gestures being made by all of these apostles, and the fact that it's a really simple setting, right? You don't see much going on here, right? This is a ceiling, some pretty plain walls with some decoration on them, but for the most part, the focus is on these men and their responses. So the artist has helped with that, Leonardo, obviously. And we're going to talk about he's done some foreshortening, like see the hands here of Andrew. You can see that Andrew's hands, right, are kind of outside, away from his body. And Da Vinci has given us this sense of space by shortening up the forearms here of Andrew. So there's some real skill going on in the painting, and we're going to talk about that in class more particularly. So the artist has made choices to show their responses. or to help us see that they're making responses. So I'm going to look at this, sorry, I'm going to look at here Judas, Peter, and John more closely. So here is Judas. Michelangelo knows these apostles because he's studied the Bible. Judas is kind of separate. Let me go back. Sorry, I'm going to go back and forth here for a sec. Judas is kind of separate from Peter and John, right? Other groupings, right? The apostles are kind of together, but here Judas kind of stands away. Same here for Bartholomew, James, and Andrew. So Judas is painted separately. He's moving kind of away from David and Peter, and his hand is reaching for this bowl that looks like Jesus' hand is reaching for this cup of wine, but it's also kind of got this bowl going on. So maybe this kind of this connection between the two of them in this piece. In his other hand here, in his right hand, Judas is holding a bag with 40 silver shekels in it, which is the amount of money the Romans gave him to deceive Jesus. The other thing to note is that his neck is pretty prominent here, and Judas later that night hung himself. Other noticing about those three here is that Peter, who is known as a protector of Christ, has a knife in his hand, right? He's ready to avenge whoever he needs to for Jesus. David is painted with his eyes kind of closed. That's similar in all the Last Supper paintings in this era. So their responses to the question or to the statement, someone here's about to betray me. That's one thing that's happening at this picture. The second thing that's happening is that Jesus is pointing here with his hand to bread and this other hand to wine, right? We're also thinking that he's also indicating the same bowl that Judas is reaching out toward. But these hands going toward the wine and to the bread indicate that what Christians have used in their services, which is when Jesus said, "Take this bread, for it is my body, and take this wine, for this is my blood, and remember me." That's what we think he is indicating here is, here's my bread, here's my wine, this is me, remember me. All right, just how do we get this focused on Christ? There are 5 ways. One way that there's a focus on Christ here is that there is called this 1-point perspective, which we're going to see in other pieces, where all of the lines in the room go to him, actually to his right eye. But let's look at, and I'll show you that more. Let's look here that there's symmetry. On either side of Jesus, there are 2 groups of 3. This is symmetry. And there is just this visual equalness on this side, on the right side, as well as on the left. There's also this, you can't see it super well in this piece, but there is a pediment here above this window. It's an archway, and it's lighter, so it looks like it is a halo for Jesus. So this points him out. Nobody else has got a halo over their head here. And Leonardo doesn't go as overtly with the halo as we saw in Byzantine and Middle Ages art. So there's a little bit of a change there from that. All right, so we've got 1-point perspective, we've got symmetry on either side of Jesus, and we've got this halo in the architecture framing Jesus's head. The other way that Jesus is emphasized is that he's kind of made into an equilateral triangle. Leonardo, being a Renaissance man, had many talents. Math, of course, was one of them. So we get the geometry of this piece really pinging. And so Jesus is an equilateral triangle. We've also got this circle with, as I mentioned before, this pediment here acting like an arched pediment acting like a halo. And then he's also very tranquil. Everybody else, let's look at this. Everybody else is up in arms, right? Literally, their arms are up, they're pointing, they're gesturing, they're leaning onto the table. Um, they're leaning in, pointing up. They're moving. He's not. He's sitting here pretty chill, pretty relaxed, calm in the sea of chaos. Okay, so let's look at this 1-point perspective here. The 1-point perspective also helps create a feeling of depth in this piece. So looking at all of these lines, right? This is the line off of the kind of the panels of the room. Here's all the lines from the ceiling, right? All of them come down and point at Jesus's right eye. So there is this flow in the room to 1 point that gives it depth and that highlights that person, Jesus. We're going to go over the next 3 in class. And here's a visual of that 1-point perspective. Context. So this fresco, I guess you can call it a fresco, but it's not really a formal fresco, is it? This painting is gone through a lot in history. This is a great black and white photo showing it in World War II. The convent was bombed. The ceiling was completely taken away. A wall was taken away, but here was the fresco behind these metal pieces. So pretty incredible. And here the movie Monuments Men with George Clooney, which I need to rewatch, right, shows us just that action in World War II. Napoleon used this as a stable for his horses and did some damage to the piece. So how have they been fixing it, and should they be fixing it? That's the question. This is an apprentice that worked with Leonardo da Vinci's work. This is the apprentice's painting of the Last Supper that was used by experts to restore the Last Supper. So you can see it's not exactly, but it is pretty dang close, right? Right, you can really see the hands here just a little more clearly in this piece and get that sense. And here's Judas with his bag of money. So to restore or not to restore? 50,000 hours spent on this project, and the amount of surface that really is attributed to Leonardo is 42.5%. So is it worth restoring? Lots of people would say yes, others would say no. Okay, that's the Last Supper. We're going to come back to more of those art elements that were used here in class.